Hello everyone, in this video you are going to learn how to install VirtualBox and how we can create a virtual machine. Now because I want to install VirtualBox and I have Hyper-V at the same time, so I have to disable Hyper-V. Well, by using bcd edit command, this command basically we can turn off the Hyper-V and we have to restart, and then we can use our VirtualBox. And if we want to go back to the Hyper-V, we have to type this in the command prompt, elevated command prompt, simply cmd, right click, run as admin, and then typing the following command. Let's say if I want to turn off, we can just simply copy and type this command. And to turn back on for the Hyper-V, we can just simply type this command. So first, let's go ahead and download VirtualBox. We have to go to the virtualbox.org. And let's go ahead and download. And because I'm using Windows, I can click on Windows host. And it's downloading here as we can see. Let's go ahead, open. And we can close this window. Let's click next. Default installation. Next, and yes, next. Alright, installation finished. Let's go ahead, click finish. Okay, now let's say we want to create new virtual machine. We can just simply click new and let's call it PC1. And if this is Windows 10, this is the default directory where it's going to store this virtual machine. Next, let's assign amount of memory. Let's say 4096 megabyte. Gives us 4 gigabytes. Next. And we want to create a virtual hard disk, so this is already selected. Let's click create. I'm going to use the extension VHD for the virtual hard disk. Next. Dynamically allocated, selected. It's basically when the data moves to the virtual hard disk, then it will take space from our physical hard drive. If we assign fixed size, it will take space right now from our physical disk. So dynamically allocated, selected, next. And this is the directory where our VHD file it's going to store. And the size of the VHD file, let's say 100 gigabytes. And remember, it's not taking 100 gigabyte right now from the physical disk because we said dynamically expanding. So when data moves to the virtual hard disk, then it will take space from the physical disk. But earlier, if we said fixed size, it would take this 100 gigabytes right now from the physical disk. Okay, let's go ahead, click create. And this is our virtual machine, PC1. And I'm going to go ahead use it for a client PC and install Windows 10. So here we can see the settings. We can just simply highlight the virtual machine, which it is already selected, and then click settings. And then we can go through the settings. The name of the virtual machine, and if I want to modify the amount of the memory, display settings information, storage. Here I can attach the VHD, or if I want to attach the ISO image, so I can do the installation. Which for this video demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use ISO image, which I downloaded earlier. So simply going to, let's say, Windows 10 eval. And going to the Microsoft website. And here, as we can see, Windows 10 Enterprise Evaluation Edition. So I downloaded already the ISO, and I'm gonna go ahead and use that ISO image. So here, when we go to the settings of the virtual machine, when we go to the storage tab, and then when we click on this DVD icon, then we need to click here and then choose create virtual optical disk. So let's go ahead and click add. Here we can see Windows 10 ISO image where you downloaded, right? So go into that directory and add the ISO image. Open, and making sure Windows 10 is selected, and then click choose. And then OK. Now we can start our virtual machine. So simply click start. As we can see, it is booting from the ISO image, and it's loading virtual machine to the stage that we can initiate the operating system installation. And actually this environment known as PE, pre-installation environment. So let's click next, and we want to do the installation. So click install now. And then accepting end user license agreement. Next. This is brand new virtual machine, so we are not upgrading from older edition to newer edition. It's just brand new operating system installation, also known as clean installation. Therefore, we have to click on custom. Here we can see our virtual hard disk. So with selecting it and then clicking next, it will start copying data from the ISO image to the virtual hard disk and installing operating system. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward. When the installation finished, I'll be back. And here, as we can see, during the operating system installation, system will restart a couple of times. And you might see this message, it says press any key to boot from an installation disk. And of course, because we attached the ISO image, we see that message. We don't want to press any key. We just let the computer continue its installation. If we press any key, we booting from installation disk, in this case installation ISO image again, and we're getting into the loop where we see the PE environment. We see basically to create partition, accepting end user license agreement, all that. So we don't press any key, we just let the computer continue its installation. It will basically boot from virtual hard disk, and it gets to the stage that if it needs any additional necessary data, it will get from the ISO image. So here it's pretty much finishing up the installation, and I'll be back when the installation finished. Okay, so here as we can see, installation almost done. Let's finishing the installation, selecting your region, the keyboard layout. If you want to add any additional or secondary keyboard layout. So here, if you want to use our Microsoft account to log in, or if you want to use local account or join it to a domain. I'm gonna go ahead and use the local account and the password. Confirming password. Creating security questions for this account. Alright, so as we can see, installation finished. And of course, I'm using Windows 10 Enterprise Evaluation Edition. The license valid for 90 days. After that, the product key activation required. So to quickly show you guys, if I go back to the Oracle VirtualBox Manager, here we can see our virtual machine. And if I go to the settings, on the network tab, here we can see the default is network address translation. It allows this virtual machine to have intranet connection. And let's go back to the virtual machine and open up command prompt. I should be able to ping Google right now. And as we can see, we have internet connection through NAT. Now if I go back and change the network settings of this virtual machine, change it back to internal network, allow all, okay. So now it's using, if I press up arrow, enter, it does not have intranet connection because it's using internal networking. And by default, the TCP IP settings for the network addressing or the IP addressing is set to obtain. To show you guys ncpa.cpl, here we can see our network adapter, which we just said internal network, right? Right click properties, So Internet Protocol version 4 properties, we can see obtain. And this is the default configuration for the TCP IP settings for the Internet Protocol version 4 TCP IP settings, and also the default configuration for IP version 6 as well. It's obtaining IP address. This is an example of dynamic IP address. Computers receiving IP address automatically from a DHCP server, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server. And here also, as we can see, when the settings is on obtain, we do have this alternate configuration tab. If the settings are not use the following IP address, this is known as static IP address. This is where we manually type the IP address here. And of course, the tab is gone. Now let's change it back to the obtain. Now here in alternate configuration tab, we can see the default settings is on automatic private IP addressing. So basically means that if the computer didn't receive IP address from DHCP server for any reason, let's say there is no DHCP server in the same network, or the connection is down, therefore this computer will automatically assign IP address to itself, and that IP address known as a PIP IP address, which always starts with 169.254 any, and of course any, the range goes from 0 to 255, 0 to 255. So when we type ipconfig and when we see the IP address of 169.254.something, that's an example of a PIP address. To show you that, if I go to command prompt and type ipconfig, enter, here we can see 169.254.216.41. So this 169.254, that's an example of a PIP. And here on IP version 6, also we can see FE80, that's a prefix, which is for link local address. It's exactly the same as a PIP address in IP version 4. Did we set IP address for IP version 6? No, operating system did automatically assign IP address to itself. And this FE80 is an example of link local address, which in the future videos we will talk about a lot more in detail. Just want to quickly show you guys here. Now we can close the command prompt, and going back here we can see, so again, let's say if the settings is on obtain and we don't want automatic private IP address, in case if the DHCP is down or connection, we can use the configuration and type our own IP address here. But by default, first obtaining IP address, if there is no DHCP, then using these IP addresses. Now let's leave it on automatic private IP addressing and go back to the general tab, and let's say use the following IP address. Here we want to use static IP address. We don't want to use dynamic IP address. So static IP address is using the following IP address. Let's say making sure numlock turned on, 192.168.1.10. This is Windows 10 using 1.10. Default subnet mask 255.255.255.0. And again, we will talk about all this a lot more in detail in the later videos. So this is an example of IP version 4, a dotted decimal format notation here. The 192, it's a first octet, that's in class C range, and the default subnet mask in class C, we see 255.255.255.0. Basically, subnet mask tells us what section of the IP address is for the network, what section of the IP address for the host. In this case, 255 means network and 0 means host. So the 192.168.1, that's the network information, network portion, and the 10, that's the host information. Do we need default gateway? Well, this is internal networking communications, right? So this virtual machine talking to another virtual machine on the same physical computer, creating internal networking. So we don't need default gateway address. What is default gateway address? If devices needs to communicate to another devices on different network, then we need default gateway address, which usually is a router interface IP address. Routers connecting this similar network together. So right now, again, this is internal networking, so we don't need default gateway. And DNS address, it's basically for naming resolution. If we are searching by name, or if we are trying to connect to another device by name, let's say ping PC4, for example, then we need DNS server in order to resolve PC4 to IP address so computers can communicate. For now, we will leave it blank, and in the future videos, we will talk about installing server and promoting the server to be a domain controller, and then adding DNS role, and then we can come back and set the DNS information, all that. Then we can join this virtual computer to that domain. So in the later videos, you guys will see that. For now, let's go ahead, just click OK. So again, we are using static IP address. This is our IP address and a subnet mask. OK, and close. And let's close. And again, going back to the command prompt, cmd ipconfig Now we can see 192. It's not 169 anymore. It's 192.168.1.10. This is the static IP address we typed it in. Actually, if you type ipconfig /all, we see more information about our TCP IP settings configurations, which here we can see our IP address, subnet mask, any DNS information or default gateway address. And here it tells us DHCP enabled, yes or no. It's telling us it's not enabled. This means this is an example of static IP address. We typed it in manually. If computer received the IP address, here would say DHCP enabled, would say yes. And this is our MAC address, our physical address for this virtual machine. And again, anytime in the command prompt, when any command we type /? gives us more information about the command. So in this case, ipconfig /? gives us all the additional parameters and syntax that we can use for that command. We have ipconfig all to see everything, ipconfig release or renew if the TCP IP settings is unobtained and we want to release the IP address and renew the IP address from DHCP, going through the process of DORA, discover offer request acknowledge. Again, later on you guys will see that a lot more in detail. So just keep in mind, anytime in the command prompt you type a command /? you can see more information about the command. In Linux, Unix systems, we just type man for the user manual, man, and then the command. And of course, ipconfig, it's ifconfig, and then enter. It gives us more information about that command in the Unix or Linux system. Okay, let's close command prompt. Well, this was a quick overview of installing VirtualBox. And then we have to make sure we have packet extensions also installed for the VirtualBox. And then we created virtual machine. We attached the ISO image, installed operating system, in this case Windows 10, and setting IP address on it. If you have any question, leave it in the comment section. Thanks for watching. And to see more tech videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks again and have a good day.